Hi everyone, gεια σας και καλώς ήρθατε to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're making Roxakia. These are very famous or popular in northern Greece. They're little pastries that are chocolate and vanilla. They're syrupy, they're sweet, they're easy to make and also very inexpensive to make and delicious. Perfect with a nice hot cup of Greek coffee. Let's get started. So since this is a syrup-based dessert, we're gonna begin with the syrup. And in my pot over here, I have 3 cups of granulated sugar. To that, I'm gonna add the zest of an orange. You could use the zest of a lemon if you prefer. And 2½ cups of water. And I'm just gonna squeeze the juice of half an orange in here. So cook this over medium heat until it comes to a boil. Once all of the sugar has dissolved, take it off of the heat, add 1 to 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract, and set it aside to cool completely. All right, so the syrup is done. Now it's time to make the dough, and the dough does contain some yeast, so we're gonna start by getting the yeast proofed. So 3/4 cup of water, or 185 milliliters, 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons or 7 grams of instant active yeast, and I'm just gonna put a little tiny bit of the flour in there. Just whisk that all up. Yeast rarely goes bad, but if your yeast has been sitting in the fridge for a few months and you haven't used it, you don't want to skip this step because you want to make sure that the yeast is nice and active. You'll know it's active when after like maybe 6 or 7 minutes, probably sooner, a nice puffy cloud will appear at the top of the mixture. I would have also added the orange juice to this, but I have to zest the oranges first and they're not ready. So I'm gonna zest the oranges in the flour mixture. So I have about 3½ cups of all-purpose flour, that's 500 grams. To that, I'm gonna zest 1 orange. I would not really use lemon in this because I feel like orange and chocolate, which is gonna be the filling of these cookies, go much better together than lemon does. So either use the orange or leave it out completely. I wouldn't substitute lemon for this, and I wouldn't put lemon juice in the mixture. If you're leaving the citrus out, just leave it out completely. And if you want to keep it vegan, use water instead. If you don't really care about that, or you're not keeping it vegan, you could use milk instead of the orange juice. And anise would be nice in these because anise and chocolate goes good. Cardamom is so good with chocolate. So you can mix this up however you like. So we have the zest in there. We're also gonna add some baking powder, 1 teaspoon. Even though we have the yeast, the baking powder is gonna help them rise a little bit as well. 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and just whisk all of the dry ingredients together. If you were using cardamom seeds or anise, they can go in here as well. Okay, we're gonna put that to the side, and now it's time to juice the oranges. We're going to use a 1/2 cup or 125 ml of orange juice. Okay, so I'm gonna get a 1/2 cup of orange juice into the mixture. I know that this yeast is good because I tested this recipe and I've been using yeast all week long, so that yeast is good. So that's gonna go in there. We're also gonna need some olive oil. We're not using cold pressed, high quality olive oil that we use in like savory cooking or like in salads and dips and things like that because the cookies would be way too heavy. I like to get a light, more refined olive oil, maybe a pomace oil that's mixed with some cold pressed olive oil like I have in this bottle. You can definitely substitute grapeseed oil for this if you prefer. Coconut oil will work, but it will lend a coconut flavor, so keep that in mind. And we need 3/4 cup of oil. 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. And then we're gonna add all of the dry ingredients. And we're gonna need this for a few minutes until the dough comes together. The dough should be nice and soft and tacky. If it's still too sticky, you can add a little bit more flour until it gets to the right consistency. All right, so when it's at this consistency right here, then it's ready. So just cut the dough into 2 portions, but you want one portion to be slightly smaller than the other by maybe like 4 or 5 ounces or by 100 grams. So a kitchen scale comes in really handy for this kind of stuff. This one is 450 grams. This one is 513 grams. That's good enough. Actually, And now we're going to make the smaller portion chocolate flavored. So to the mixture right here, the smaller mixture, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. This is unsweetened cocoa powder. Get the best kind that you can get, the best quality so it has the most flavor. And I'm also going to add a heaping teaspoon of cinnamon. You can add 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. You could even add about 60 grams of ground walnuts, ground pecans, whatever your favorite nuts are. You can add them to this. Many times nuts are added to the chocolate mixture, but we like it chocolatey with a little bit of cinnamon. And I'm just going to knead this until it's all dark and brown and chocolatey. Since this is a little bit on the dry side, I am going to go in and add a little bit of orange juice, if I can find it. Here it is. A little bit of orange juice. Maybe like 2-3 tablespoons. And I'm also going to add a tiny bit more cocoa powder, just like 2 tablespoons. And I'm going to knead it. It should absorb way better now. Okay, so I'm going to set the chocolate one aside for now. And I'm going to clean this counter up just a little bit so that way it's nice and clean. And when I roll out the vanilla part, it won't just have bits of chocolate on it. I'm going to lightly flour the work surface with some all-purpose flour. I'm going to roll this out to a thin rectangle, about 12 by 10. This is about 10, and this is a little bit bigger than 12. We're just going to even it out when we put the chocolate in. Let me clean this up. I don't want any white on the chocolate. And I'm just going to roll this out so it can be as long as the longest side is. And I would even get it a tiny bit longer because it does tend to shrink back a little bit. And now we're just going to carefully roll it in. And you want to roll it up leaving as little air as possible. So basically roll it tightly. Just like that. I'm just going to cut the ends so everything is nice and neat. I have 2 baking trays that have been lined with parchment paper. I'm going to make little 1/2-inch cuts so that way we end up with these nice, they're not rounds yet, but once you cut each piece, you can just press it out. And there you have it. So once you've cut them all, you could just press them. And then if you need to roll them using the counter, honestly, you don't even need to do that. You could do it all with your hand, kind of reshape them. These are big on the bigger side. If you wanted to make smaller ones, you would cut the chocolate roll in half and then roll the vanilla dough also into 2 rectangles instead of 1. And then you'll have smaller little circles, which will feed a bigger crowd. It's up to you. So the pastries are ready to get baked. This recipe makes about 15 of the bigger ones, and if you're making the smaller ones, you'll get almost 30. It's up to you. Let me know how you're making them in the comments below. Make sure that the oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. These are going to bake for about 25-30 minutes or until they're beautifully golden on the white and the vanilla part of the cookie. Once they come out of the oven, then you can transfer them all to 1 tray and pour that delicious vanilla orange syrup on top. Let them sit in the syrup for about an hour or so until they absorb it. Another way to do it is just to dunk them in the syrup for about 30 seconds. They'll be less syrupy that way, so it's up to you. You let me know how you're going to do it in the comment section. I'll show you what they look like as soon as they're done. My Roxakia are ready. They're beautifully golden. They should be syrupy and sweet and delicious and nice and soft. It is time for the taste test. Now, like I said, these are best served with a nice cup of coffee and with some good friends over so you can enjoy them and eat them together. So good. They're soft. I can't even put my finger on it. They kind of taste like baked donuts. I feel like almost a little bit like if this was like a tsureki cookie. If you've had tsureki, the Greek Easter bread with a hint of chocolate in it, so delicious. So I think if you put some of the mahlepi powder in this, the ground mahlepi, they would be even better. I think they're perfect. I did make a little tiny mistake, which I don't want you to make. For some strange reason, the chocolate dough does need to be a little more wet than what I made it. If it's a little more wet and sticky by adding the juice in there, and you could even put a little bit more olive oil, more than I did in just the chocolate, the smaller batch that we're making, that we're flavoring with chocolate, it's gonna absorb the chocolate and be a dark brown color throughout. Mine has specks of white. It's still good, but I think it does need to be a little moister. And it was much moister when I was recipe testing, but everything tends to go wrong when I'm recording. I'm a little bit glad it does, because then I could show you what could go wrong. And if it does go wrong with you, you can fix it. If you don't fix it just the way I did, it's still gonna be delicious, but they'll be even more delicious if the chocolate part of this is a little bit softer. The dough needs to be softer. It needs to be juicier, moister, so that way that cocoa powder really gets a chance to absorb in there, if you know what I mean. Some hazelnuts would be really good in this, because who doesn't like chocolate and hazelnuts? I hope you guys give this a try. Make some coffee, call some friends over, and share this goodness with them. I hope you guys like it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you want to learn how to make more delicious desserts, click over here, and I'll see you right over there. Yes,